My name is Megan Hayes. I'm 33, single, and until recently, I thought I had carved out a pretty decent life for myself. As a freelance graphic designer, I have the freedom to set my own schedule, choose projects that genuinely interest me, and work from the quiet sanctuary of my home. A charming, slightly rambling bungalow nestled just outside Portland, Oregon. The house itself was an incredible gift, not financially, but in terms of use. My Uncle Arthur, my dad's older, more successful, and infinitely kinder brother, inherited it years ago, and knowing my freelance life required a stable base after years of apartment hopping, generously offered it to me indefinitely, rent free. Just keep the place loved, Meg, he'd said. That's all I ask. And I did. I loved its quirky layout. The big windows overlooking a perpetually damp but lush garden, the dedicated room I turned into my sunlit studio. It was my haven, the place where I could immerse myself in design work, recharge my creative batteries, and enjoy the simple peace of my own company. Or at least that was the case until about 2 years ago. It started with my parents, Robert and Linda Hayes. Dad's small construction business had gone under during the last economic downturn, and a series of subsequent bad investments wiped out their retirement savings. Their own house, the one I grew up in, faced foreclosure. Suddenly, they had nowhere else to go. Of course, I offered them refuge. Just temporarily more, Mom assured me, dabbing her eyes. Just until your father finds something stable again. Temporarily turned into 2 years. They moved into the two spare bedrooms, bringing with them not just furniture, but a constant cloud of judgment and unsolicited advice. My freelance career, which comfortably supported me, was suddenly deemed unreliable and not a real job. Are you sure you're saving enough, Megan? Dad would ask, conveniently forgetting his savings were non existent. Working from home all day in your pajamas? It doesn't seem very ambitious, Mom would comment, glancing pointedly at my comfortable work attire. My single status became a constant topic. 33, dear. The clock is ticking. Look at your cousin Emily, married with two already. I learned to bite my tongue, retreating into my studio, focusing on my work, paying for the groceries they assumed would just magically appear, listening to their complaints about the rising cost of everything while contributing little themselves besides criticism. The peace of my sanctuary began to erode, replaced by the low-level hum of their constant presence and disapproval. Then, 6 months ago, the situation escalated. My younger sister, Jess, arrived on the doorstep, suitcase in tow, tears streaming down her face. Another dramatic breakup, another lost job, this time from a boutique she insisted was beneath her talent anyway. Without even consulting me, Mom and Dad immediately declared she needed family support and installed her in the last unoccupied space, the small den adjacent to my studio. Isn't this wonderful, Megan? Mom chirped, ignoring my stunned silence. All the family together again. Wonderful wasn't the word I would have chosen. Chaotic, maybe. Suffocating, definitely. Suddenly, my quiet haven felt like a crowded lifeboat, and I was the only one rowing. Jess, unlike my parents' quiet judgment, was overtly critical and entitled. She treated my home like a hotel, leaving messes in her wake, borrowing my things without asking, complaining about the Wi-Fi speed while streaming reality TV all day. She and Mom formed an immediate alliance, their days filled with hushed conversations and shared gossip, often punctuated by critical remarks about me, just loud enough for me to overhear while working in my studio. Honestly, Mom, her portfolio is so dated. No wonder she doesn't have a real agency job. And that client call she took yesterday, so unprofessional sounding. If she just dressed a little better, maybe put some effort in, she might actually meet someone. It was exhausting, demoralizing. I felt increasingly like an unwelcome guest in the house Uncle Arthur had entrusted to me. My work suffered from the constant interruptions and the tense atmosphere. The loneliness, paradoxically, intensified despite the crowded house. That's when I decided I needed a companion. Someone who wouldn't judge my career choices or critique my decorating style. Someone whose presence would be purely comforting. I went to the local animal rescue shelter just to look, and met Jasper. He was a small, sleek black cat with enormous green eyes. initially shy, but with a rumbling purr that started the moment I tentatively scratched behind his ears. He'd been found as a stray, slightly underweight, needing a quiet home. It felt like fate. I adopted him on the spot. Predictably, bringing Jasper home ignited a fresh round of complaints. A cat? Megan, really? Mom sighed dramatically. The shedding. The smell. What about allergies? Great. Another mouth to feed, Dad grumbled, though he secretly seemed intrigued by Jasper's quiet dignity. Jess was the most vocal. You cats are creepy, and it better not touch my stuff, especially not my new cashmere sweater. A sweater I suspected was purchased with money borrowed from Mom, likely originating from Dad asking me for help with an unexpected bill. Listen, I stated firmly, holding Jasper close, feeling his reassuring purr against my chest. This is my home too. I need the companionship. Jasper stays. I will cover all his expenses, handle his care completely, and ensure he doesn't bother you if you leave him alone. End of discussion. My tone, sharper than usual, surprised them into silence. They weren't happy, but they reluctantly accepted Jasper's presence. Jasper quickly became my shadow, my confidant, my furry anchor in the increasingly turbulent household. He'd curl up on my desk while I worked, offer silent commentary with a flick of his tail, and greet me at the door with a welcoming meow. Even Dad seemed to soften slightly towards him, occasionally letting Jasper nap on his newspaper. Mom and Jess mostly ignored him, which was fine by me. Around this time, I had a long call with Uncle Arthur. He checked in periodically, and I usually kept my complaints about my family's extended stay vague. But that day, worn down by a particularly pointed critique from Mom about my failure to launch, compared to Jess's supposed and invisible potential, I finally confided in him about the full extent of the situation, the constant criticism, the financial drain, though I downplayed that part, the feeling of being invaded. Uncle Arthur listened patiently, then sighed heavily. Meggie, he said, using his old nickname for me, I let you live in that house so you could have peace, build your life, not so it could become, well, this. Your parents, bless their hearts, always enabled Jessica. And Robert, he lets Linda walk all over him. This isn't healthy for you. He paused. Maybe it's time we made things more official. Give you more control over your space. He didn't elaborate further, just said he'd look into some options regarding the property title. I thanked him, touched by his concern, but didn't think much more about it, assuming it was just talk. Life settled back into its tense routine. Me working, paying bills, deflecting criticism. Mom and Jess gossiping. Dad reading the paper. Jasper napping in sunbeams. Until one afternoon, everything changed over something as stupid as a handbag. Life with my entire immediate family under one roof, the roof Uncle Arthur provided for me, settled into a rhythm of simmering resentment, punctuated by moments of outright absurdity. My parents, Robert and Linda, seemed to forget they were guests, offering constant critiques of my freelance work schedule. Still in your work clothes at noon, Megan? My cooking. A bit bland, dear, don't you think? And my perpetual single status. My sister Jess, meanwhile, treated the house like her personal crash pad crossed with a luxury resort, leaving trails of discarded clothes, makeup palettes, and snack wrappers in her wake, all while complaining about the lack of creative energy for her job hunt, which seemed to consist mainly of scrolling through TikTok. My only solace was my work, which I retreated into like a bunker, and Jasper. My sleek black rescue cat Jasper became my silent confidant, a warm, purring presence often curled up on the corner of my desk as I navigated client revisions and looming deadlines. He asked for nothing but food, chin scratches, and the occasional sunbeam, unlike my human housemates. The fragile truce, however, was destined to shatter. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I had rushed out for a quick client meeting downtown, leaving Jasper napping peacefully in his favorite armchair. I wasn't gone for more than 90 minutes. As I was pulling back into the driveway, my phone rang, Jess's name flashing on the screen. I answered, expecting another complaint about the Wi-Fi or a request to pick up her dry cleaning. Megan! Jess shrieked into the phone, her voice shrill with panic and fury. Get back here right now. Your stupid cat just ruined my new handbag. Ruined it. My stomach dropped. What? Jasper? What happened? He scratched it. All over. My brand new morose satchel, the one I just bought? There are claw marks everywhere. It's destroyed. She wailed. You need to pay for this. This is all your fault for bringing that beast into this house. Click. She hung up. I rushed inside, my heart pounding. I found Jess in the living room, pacing frantically, holding up the expensive-looking leather handbag like Exhibit A in a capital crime. Mom and Dad stood beside her, faces grim, clearly having been summoned to witness the tragedy. I looked at the bag. There were indeed a few faint, thin scratches near the bottom corner, the kind a curious cat might make batting at a dangling strap, certainly not deep gouges. And the bag itself? It was lying carelessly on the floor beside the sofa when I left, right next to Jasper's favorite scratching post. Despite my asking Jess repeatedly to keep her expensive things off the common area floors. Jess, calm down. I said, trying to keep my voice even. They look like surface scratches. And the bag was on the floor. Don't you dare blame me, Jess shrieked, tears now streaming down her face. Remarkably quickly, I noted. That cat is a menace. It deliberately attacked my bag. It cost over $600, Megan. You need to pay for it, and you need to get rid of that animal. Now, hold on, I started. But my parents immediately jumped in, tag-teaming me as usual. Megan, honestly, Mom began, her voice sharp with disapproval. Look what your cat did. It's Jessica's brand new bag. We told you that cat would be trouble. You need to take responsibility for your pet's actions, Dad added sternly, crossing his arms. Jessica is distraught. The least you can do is pay for the damages. They didn't ask how it happened. Didn't acknowledge Jess's carelessness. Just immediate blame directed at me and Jasper. The unfairness of it, the familiar pattern of siding with Jess no matter the circumstances, made something inside me snap. No, I said quietly but firmly. I'm not paying for it. It wouldn't have happened if Jess hadn't left her expensive bag on the floor like a cat toy. It was an accident caused by her negligence. Jess gasped dramatically. Negligence! How dare you? I can't live like this. I can't have my things destroyed by your mangy animal. She turned to my parents, tears flowing freely now. Mom, Dad, I've had enough. Either that cat goes or she goes. This is our family home too now, isn't it? We shouldn't have to put up with this. I waited, expecting my parents, despite their bias, to inject some adult rationality into the situation. Instead, my father looked at me, his expression hardening. Jessica has a point, Megan, he said coldly. This situation isn't working. The cat is clearly causing problems. If you can't control it or take responsibility for it, then perhaps it is best if you and Jasper find somewhere else to live. My mother nodded sadly, avoiding my eyes. Yes, maybe some time apart would be good for everyone, dear. You seem so stressed lately anyway. I stared at them, utterly speechless for a moment. They were actually kicking me out. Me. From the house Uncle Arthur had given me refuge in. Over a few minor scratches on my sister's carelessly placed handbag, because I refused to pay for her mistake and refused to get rid of my cat. The sheer, breathtaking absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. But then a strange, icy calm settled over me. I remembered Uncle Arthur's phone call just 3 weeks prior. He'd called after I finally broke down and told him how unbearable the living situation had become, how trapped I felt. His voice had been tight with anger, not at me, but at them. Meggie, he'd said, this is nonsense. That house is meant to be your sanctuary, not their entitlement. I'm overnighting some documents. Sign them with the mobile notary I've arranged for Friday. It's time you had full control. The documents had been the official deed transfer, putting the house title, finally and irrevocably, into my name alone. Signed, filed, recorded last week. They didn't know. They still thought they were living under Uncle Arthur's roof with me as the tolerated, long-term guest they could eventually push out. They had no idea they were standing in my house, demanding I leave. The knowledge was a shield, cool and hard inside me. I looked at their 3 expectant faces, Jess smug, Mom sadly resigned, Dad sternly resolute. They expected tears, arguments, pleading. They expected me to fold, like always. Okay, I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. They blinked, surprised by my easy capitulation. Okay, Dad repeated, frowning slightly. Yes, I nodded. If that's how you feel, if my presence and Jasper's is causing such unbearable disruption to your family home, I let the words hang for a beat. Then we'll leave. Jess's expression shifted instantly to one of triumphant satisfaction. Mom looked vaguely relieved. Dad just nodded curtly, his authority seemingly restored. I turned without another word and walked towards my bedroom. I could feel their surprised, perhaps slightly unnerved, gazes following me. I closed my door, leaned against it for a second, took a deep breath, then pulled out my largest suitcase and Jasper's carrier. I started packing methodically, efficiently. My laptop, my work files, chargers, toiletries, a few changes of clothes. Jasper watched me from the bed, purring, oblivious. I packed his food, his favorite toy mouse, his litter box supplies, everything essential for a few nights away. When I emerged maybe 20 minutes later, suitcase in one hand, Jasper securely in his carrier in the other, they were huddled in the living room, talking in low tones. They looked up, surprised I was ready so quickly. Well, I said, walking towards the front door, keeping my tone light, almost casual. We'll be out of your hair then. I paused at the door, turning back to face them, allowing myself a small, cool smile. Just so you know, I added as if it were an afterthought. Uncle Arthur finalized the official title transfer last week. This house, I gestured vaguely around the room they had invaded, is legally mine now, completely. Just thought you should be aware. I watched the information land, watched their faces shift from smug satisfaction to utter disbelief, then dawning, horrified comprehension. What? Jess sputtered, her jaw dropping. No, that's impossible. Uncle Arthur wouldn't. Legally yours? Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. What are you talking about, Megan? Dad just stared, his face turning an alarming shade of gray, finally speechless. You asked me to leave my own house, I said quietly, meeting each of their stunned gazes. So I am. Temporarily. I opened the front door. But you might want to start packing too. Seems you'll be needing alternative accommodation rather soon. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the formal eviction notice. I believe standard procedure is 30 days. I stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut gently behind me, leaving them frozen in shock and panic in the house they thought they controlled, but which now belonged entirely and unequivocally to me. Jasper meowed softly in his carrier as I walked towards my car. The air outside felt clean, fresh. The reckoning had arrived sooner than expected, triggered by a cat and a handbag, but the outcome felt utterly, satisfyingly just. Driving away from the house that night, with Jasper meowing softly but reassuringly from his carrier on the passenger seat, felt like escaping a pressure cooker. The initial shockwave of the confrontation gave way to a surge of adrenaline, sharp and clarifying. They had kicked me out of my own house over a scratched handbag. The sheer, toxic absurdity of it all solidified my resolve. There was no going back, no reconciliation possible after this. I didn't drive far, just to a quiet, pet-friendly motel on the outskirts of Portland I'd found online earlier. Checking in felt surreal. Just hours ago, I was arranging appetizers for my parents' anniversary party. Now I was signing into a motel room with my cat, effectively homeless, despite legally owning the house I'd just fled. The irony wasn't lost on me. My first call the next morning wasn't to family, but to my lawyer, Ms. Henderson, the sharp woman Uncle Arthur had recommended when he arranged the title transfer. I explained the situation. The argument triggered by Jess's handbag, their demand that I leave, my revelation about the house title, and my departure. Good, Ms. Henderson said calmly after listening. You removed yourself from a potentially volatile situation, and you clearly informed them of your legal ownership before leaving. Perfect. Now, we proceed formally. Within hours, her office dispatched formal 30-day notices to vacate, via certified mail, addressed individually to Robert Hayes, Linda Hayes, and Jessica Hayes at my property address, citing their status as occupants without a lease agreement following the owner's withdrawal of consent. Simultaneously, Ms. Henderson filed the paperwork, with the county court initiating the formal eviction process should they fail to comply. The legal gears were turning. Predictably, the panicked calls and texts started within days, likely after the certified letters arrived. First, Jess, alternating between tearful pleading, "Megan, please don't do this. Where will we go?" and furious accusations, "You're throwing your own family out. Uncle Arthur will never forgive you." Then Mom, her voice trembling with self-pity and indignation, "How could you be so cold after all we sacrificed for you?" The irony made me almost laugh. Then Dad, attempting a stern, authoritative tone that now sounded utterly hollow. "Megan, this is unacceptable. We need to sit down and discuss this like adults. Retract this notice immediately." I didn't answer any of them directly. Following Ms. Henderson's strict instructions, I forwarded screenshots of any abusive or threatening messages. There were a few veiled ones from Jess, and replied only once via email to all three. "All matters regarding the property and address and your occupancy should be directed to my legal counsel, Ms. Evelyn Reed Henderson. Please refrain from contacting me directly." Then I blocked their numbers again. Uncle Arthur called me a few days later. "Meggie," he sighed. "Robert called me, ranting. Linda called me, crying. Jessica called me, accusing. Sounds like quite the hornet's nest you stirred up." "They kicked me out, Uncle Arthur," I reminded him quietly. "Out of the house you gave me security in." "I know, sweetheart. And you did exactly the right thing. I told Robert as much. Told him he and Linda enabled Jessica's entitlement for far too long and treated you abominably. Told him that deed transfer was the best thing I ever did." He paused. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on, Megan. Stay strong. Don't let them guilt you." His unwavering support was a balm. The 30 days passed in a tense blur. I found a decent short-term rental apartment that allowed cats, moved my essentials from the motel, and focused intently on my graphic design work, finding solace in the clean lines and creative problem solving. I heard through Uncle Arthur that things at the house were apparently devolving into chaos and recrimination, but I refused to engage. On day 31, Ms. Henderson and I, along with two deputies for a civil standby, a precaution Ms. Henderson insisted upon, arrived at the house precisely at noon. The locks had indeed been changed, just as Daniel's counterpart had done in another story, but Ms. Henderson had anticipated this and had a locksmith ready. My parents and Jess were waiting inside, their faces a mixture of defiance and desperation. The house was a mess, clear signs of hasty, angry packing. "You can't just throw us out," Mom started immediately. "Actually," Ms. Henderson stated calmly, holding up the court-stamped eviction order based on their failure to vacate after the legal notice, "we can. The locksmith will now secure the premises under Ms. Hayes' ownership. You have 1 hour remaining to remove any essential personal belongings under the supervision of these officers. Any items left behind will be considered abandoned property." There were tears, mostly from Mom, sullen glares, mostly from Jess, and stony silence from Dad. But no real argument left. They knew they had lost. Watching them load boxes into their old car, the vehicle looking even more dilapidated next to the house I had technically maintained, felt anticlimactic. No dramatic confrontation, just the quiet, undignified end to their ill-conceived occupation. Once they were gone, I stood alone with Jasper in the empty living room. The house felt huge, silent, tainted by the recent events. There were no happy memories here for me anymore, only the ghost of obligation and the sharp tang of betrayal. I didn't want it. I listed the house for sale the following week. It sold surprisingly quickly in the active Portland market to a young family eager for the updated kitchen and the quiet street. After closing costs, realtor fees, and setting aside a significant chunk for taxes, I walked away with a sum that not only replenished my original savings, but left me with a comfortable cushion. The tangible result of Uncle Arthur's foresight and my refusal to be erased. The first thing I did wasn't to celebrate, but to plan. That dream I'd shelved, the one about starting my own independent graphic design studio, Specializing in branding for local artisans and sustainable businesses, the kind of work that felt meaningful, creative, mine, suddenly felt within reach. I spent the next few months meticulously crafting a business plan, scouting locations, reconnecting with potential clients whose values aligned with mine. I found a small, light filled studio space in a revitalized warehouse district, perfect for focused work and client meetings. Julian Vance, my supportive husband from another story's timeline, wasn't here in this reality, but the principle remained, building something for myself on my own terms. 6 months after being kicked out on that Tuesday afternoon, I stood in the middle of Hayes Creative Studio, paintbrush in hand, working on a logo design for a local organic farm. Sunlight streamed through the large industrial windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Jasper lay curled asleep on a worn velvet armchair in the corner, purring softly. My phone buzzed occasionally with emails from happy clients, not frantic texts from demanding relatives. The peace was profound. It wasn't just the absence of conflict, it was the presence of purpose, of independence, of quiet self determination. My family? I heard snippets occasionally through Uncle Arthur. They were struggling. Living in a cramped apartment, the parents' relationship strained. Jess still unemployed. I felt a distant pang of sadness for the family I wished I could have had, but no guilt for the one I refused to be dragged down by. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the most loving act is to set a boundary. Sometimes the greatest strength is found in walking away, and sometimes the best way to honor a gift, like the sanctuary Uncle Arthur gave me, is to have the courage to leave it behind when it becomes a cage and build your own haven, brick by brick, purring cat by your side.